All right, so now that we've talked about issues with CSS box model and how it affects overall design, let's talk about classes. And one thing that's kind of interesting about classes is you can actually combine classes together. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, here I have this class I have called red text, right? And I'm going to go here and I'm going to apply red text, and I'm also going to apply it to this heading 2 here, and let's apply it and preview it. And like it seems, it makes both things red, right? Now let's say that I added a font family to this, and let's say I added Arial Black to my list here. So now both of these are Arial Black, but let's say I didn't want both of them to be Arial Black. Let's say I wanted one of these to be Courier and one of these to be Arial Black. Well, the problem is that this is going to apply both properties to both items. There's no way to only apply one of them but not to both. So then the answer is, well, you could make two versions of it, red text 1 that has Arial Black and red text 2 that has Courier, but there's actually a more efficient way to do this, which is that when you apply classes to something, you can actually apply multiple classes to something. So what I'm going to do here is I've applied the red text class to the H1 and the H2, and then down here I have other classes that are dealing with fonts. So there's a font Courier, font Arial, and font Helvetica. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to apply a second class, font Courier, and I'm going to go here and I'm going to apply font Helvetica. Let's do font Arial. Okay, so this one is getting font. This one's going to have, even though they're both going to get the red text, this one's going to have the font Courier applied. This one's going to have the font Arial applied. It's fine. You can apply as many classes as you want. Just make sure that you separate them by spaces. It doesn't matter which one comes first. So now you can see that one is receiving Courier and one is receiving Arial as its font, but they're both red. Okay. Now it's important that you don't do this. Whatever you do, do not do this, where you just apply it twice, the class attribute. The reason why is when you do this, what you're actually doing is replacing this with this. So if I was to do this, basically what's going to happen here is this may not come through properly. So you always want to put both classes within the quotation marks here. And in fact, you can actually have as many as you want. I put 2, but let's do class red text, class equals red text class equals font Courier. So I'm going to have font, let's have font Courier for the first and third. And then the last one, I want to use this underline class, which underlines my text. And let's save. Okay. So, and if I actually take a look at this, I can see how font Courier and red text is applied to this. Font Courier, or red text and font Arial is being applied to this. And on this one, underline, Courier, and red text are all applying to this third one. Another thing to note is when you're writing a lot of CSS, sometimes you may accidentally apply multiple properties to something. So for instance, here I have this H1, and in one of these I've set the color, in another I've set the font, and in another one I've set text decoration of underline. And when I preview this in my browser, you'll see it actually applies all 3 of them. Okay, so even if they're separated into different rules, basically, as long as the properties don't conflict with each other, they'll just basically stack up together. So I'm getting all of these together: underline, font, and color. I also want you guys to notice that here in this H2, that I have a class, or sorry, not tag selector. I have a class selector, and I have an ID all being applied. So you can actually have something that's being affected by a tag, something that's being affected also by a class, and something that's also being affected by an ID. In this case, because the properties don't conflict with one another, they will just kind of stack up and add to each other. And I get something like this, where I get my ID, my class, and my tag selector. Okay. So what happens if we get properties that conflict with each other? Okay, so this can happen. Okay, so let's take a look in exercise 12, and this brings up this concept of specificity. Specificity is what CSS property will affect what exactly. Okay, so I have this HTML document. This is exercise 12. And I'm just going to split this. And let's take a look here. And notice that I have a p tag, a class, and an ID. Okay, so my p tag is set to yellow. And if I preview the HTML page, my paragraphs are yellow. Okay, but what if I came here, this is the HTML, and I'm going to apply that blue text class. Okay, so we have right now a conflict, because the tag selector is saying that the first paragraph should be yellow because it's a p tag, and the class selector here is saying that the text should be blue. Okay, so this is where we have a conflict. They're not just going to stack together because they're not related to each other. Or sorry, they are related. They're in conflict with each other. So the question is, how do you solve this problem? So there are certain rules of specificity to say who would win out in this situation. So typically the way it works is if there's a tag selector and there's a class selector, the class will win out over the tag. So even though this is set to yellow, this will trump that. And if I preview this or we refresh it, oops, did I save? Make sure I save. This is going to turn blue because classes trump over tag selectors. And in fact, if you highlight this, you can see how the tag is below the class because the class is considered stronger or higher than the tag selector. Okay. Now let's say I went back here and I'm also going to apply an ID. You can apply an ID, a class to something, and I'm going to apply the ID of red text. Okay, so I have this ID of red text. And once again, we're getting a conflict because the class is saying that the text should be blue, and my ID is saying that the text should be red. And once again, it can't be both blue and red, so what's going to happen here? And the answer is that in this kind of situation, an ID trumps over a class and it trumps over a tag selector. So in this case, for my red text, I'm going to go and save, and you're going to see that because this is set with an ID, that this trumps over the class and it trumps over the tag selector. Okay. I'm going to remove this. So by removing the class and the ID, it's just going to go back to being yellow. Okay. And let's say I was writing my code and I was not being very careful. And let's say I accidentally wrote the same class twice, or the same CSS rule twice, but with different values. So let's say the original one at the top is written to have my paragraphs be yellow, and then here my paragraphs are orange. Okay. So the question is, which one's going to win? Because in this case, they're both tags, so it's not like one is automatically higher. So which would win out? And the answer to this is actually, the answer is whichever one comes last. That is the one that's going to win. So in this case, because my paragraph color is set to orange, that is last in the list. So in this case, that's going to trump over this. Think of it as like when you save something and then you save over something, what you saved over becomes the new thing. So it's like we're applying the yellow and then we apply this on top. So in this case, my text should turn orange, and it does. Okay. All right, I'm going to get rid of this second one. Goes back to yellow. And let's throw one more little curveball here. Okay, so we talked about, classes versus IDs versus tag selectors. By the way, there's another one I forgot to mention. It's called an inline style. So I'm going to apply my ID back real quick. An inline style is a style that's literally applied in the HTML. This can be done with an attribute called style. And you're actually allowed to write CSS directly through here. So if I wanted to, I could write CSS in this line. Like I could set the color to purple. Okay. So this is what's called an inline style. It doesn't require a selector because essentially it's selecting the thing it's being applied to. This is the property, this is the value. In this case, an inline style trumps over everything else. So even though typically an ID would be stronger than the other two, this trumps over that, and so my text would turn, make sure everything's saved, would turn purple in this case. Okay. I'm going to remove that, and I'm going to remove the ID real quick. So because this goes back to just being regular paragraphs, they go back to being yellow. Now let's say I did something like this. Remember that we had an inline, we had our internal CSS and our external CSS. This is an external CSS document here that's attached to this, but I might come in here and I might say something like P, comma, or, make a rule that's pink, okay? Now the question is, once again, which one, this is the same as this. They're both tag selectors. So the question is, which one wins out? Is it the yellow or is it the pink one? And the answer is similar to when it was both in the external file. The answer is whichever one comes second. So if you look at my code, my internal style is coming first and then my external style. So my external style is coming last, so the text should stay yellow, and it does. But if I was to happen to take this code and cut it so that the external would come after the internal, now it's going to turn pink because this is coming last. And whichever one comes last when things are otherwise equal becomes the dominant one. Okay. All right, last thing. I'll let you guys try this out. Actually, yeah, I'll let you try this out. So I'm going to go and I'm going to apply the class back. And I'm going to apply the ID back. Okay. That's going to make my first paragraph red, right? There's one more secret thing we can do. Okay. It's called important. And it's important spelled like this. When you apply this in the value before the semicolon, what this does is it says that this value should always trump no matter what. So even though I have this tag selector, even though tags are below a class, and they're also below the ID, if I was to go in here and type in exclamation point important, that would trump everything else, and then this should go back to being yellow, and it does. Okay, so don't use this all the time. This is kind of one of those, if you can't figure something else out, this is, try this. It's kind of a a fail, kind of a last resort sort of thing, but this is what you can do. Okay. All right, so try that out. That was exercise 10, 11, and 12.